Good afternoon. I'm Paul McMonagle from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee. Thank you for joining us for the Connect and Communicate series, presenting the May 2024 session, Advocating for Leisure Reading in Your Academic Collection. This discussion will be recorded, and it will be made available to Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PALA website, as well as sent to registrants and available on our CRD blog. For this discussion, you will only need a headset or speakers. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen throughout the discussion, and we'll attempt to include your questions as appropriate during the discussion or at the end, whichever the presenters prefer. We'll also do our best to assist participants with technical issues. Please post those issues in the chat box as well. This session is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division's Connect and Communicate series. I'd like to thank the CRD board for supporting this initiative, and the other Connect and Communicate Planning Committee members, including Adam, Ronalie, Christy, Andrea, and Amy, who is here with us today. Please contact any one of the team for information about becoming a PALA member if you are not already. This project is made possible by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, as administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Education through the Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania itself, who happens to have Josh Shapiro as their governor. That came over. And finally, I'd like to thank and introduce our presenters for today's event, Monica Gingerich, Emily Rimland, and Katie O'Hara Krebs from the Pennsylvania State University Libraries. And it is all your show now. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to kick things off for us today and just we'll do real quick introductions, and then we'll move over to our slides. My name is Emily Rimland. I'm at Penn State University Libraries at the University Park campus. I'm the interim head of Library Learning Services, which is our teaching and learning unit here in the libraries. And I'll pass it over to Katie to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Katie O'Hara Krebs. I am currently working as a library assistant in the Microforms and Government Information Unit here at the Penn State University Libraries at University Park. I was working with Library Learning Services as an intern in 2023, which is when I got to work on some of the materials that we'll be talking about today.
And I'm Monica Gingrich. I am the coordinator for student experience and engagement at University Libraries, and I work under in library learning services.
So that's who we are. Let me go ahead and share my slides with you. Can everybody see that? Okay. All right, so we're here to talk about advocating for leisure reading in academic collections. And I have a little roadmap here of what we're going to cover today in the session. I'm going to be talking about the background and context, kind of like table setting for trends and other things we're seeing around leisure reading. We'll talk about working with different stakeholders on these types of collections and projects. We'll get into a diversity, equity, inclusion audit and analysis, other collection analyses we did on this leisure reading collection, and also talk about promotion and some other related aspects of this type of collection. So that's kind of what we have planned for today. And then we also have an interactive portion scheduled for today. So full disclosure, this is on a site that is new to us, so it may go horribly wrong, but we'll roll with it if it doesn't. And we can always use the chat as backup. But we wanted to start with a little bit of a poll here of the audience to take a guess on what is the trendiest fiction subgenre of 2023? What do you think it is? And if you want to get set up for this, we actually have 3 different polls. So we'll be coming back to this. What you can do is use your phone to scan that QR code that's on the slide right now. And that should take you to menti.com. And you should see the poll there. You can also type in the URL that's listed on the slide, which is menti.com. And then you need that code that's listed there, the 34487925. So either way, it should get you there. And is anybody having trouble with accessing that right now? Okay, I'm going to flip my screen over to this. So this poll is open for you to guess. what was the trendiest fiction subgenre of 2023? And your options are romance, fantasy, romantasy, true crime, or manga. So go ahead and vote. Once again, the same information is on this screen now. You can scan the QR code, or the website and the code is at the top of the screen. Let me check the chat here. Thank you, Monica, for putting that in the chat. So these are our responses so far. You all did wonderful. You picked the right answer, which is romantasy, which saw a huge that's a amalgamation of fantasy and romance. And Fourth Wing is an example of that genre that's really like popular right now. And unsurprisingly, this was the trendiest fiction subgenre of 2023, according to Publishers Weekly. So good job on that. I'm gonna go back to my slides. So to get things, the sort of table setting underway, what defines leisure reading? So leisure reading is defined as any voluntary choice of something to read in one's free time. Or in other words, for academic libraries, this might be things that students read that are not for school or work. So things they're choosing to read for pleasure outside of those parameters. Sometimes you also see it called by the term recreational reading or volitional reading. So you may see those terms as well, but it all means the same thing, is this kind of reading for pleasure. You may be wondering, why is leisure reading important? There are a ton of reasons why leisure reading is important. Some of them are just outlined on this slide. It adds, to our overall enjoyment in our lives, right? It's for leisure. But it also supports a lot of curricular things related to critical thinking, comprehension, vocabulary, etc. There's all kinds of research that talks about how much it supports that. But it also goes on to promote empathy and personal growth in students. It's a stress reliever, so it supports mental health as well as their curricular learning. And it's also something that benefits students like the entire time as an entire student. So like outside of the classroom, it supports them holistically, and it goes on to benefit students that are of a traditional age as they move through adulthood. So tons of support and research out there that really talk about how important leisure reading is. However, there's sort of a shadow side to that, so to speak. The number of adults who are reading is probably on the decline, and I phrase it that way because the research, the figures and statistics that are out there, it's a little bit of sometimes it's apples and oranges, like how they're coming up with this data. So sometimes it's not entirely clear that it's on the decline, but generally most research and publications are saying that reading by adults is on the decline. And also, as we're all probably aware, higher ed is really facing a lot of budget uncertainty. So that is also going to impact collections, in particular leisure reading. And, is another factor that leisure reading collections are kind of contending with. This is a really good report that we found from the National Endowment for the Arts, but it was conducted in 2017. But we have not been able to find this type of data that's really like this drilled down more recently, even though this same survey has been conducted since then. But I think it still gives a good snapshot of like how people read and in what formats they read. So this is by age, and you can see the dark blue color towards the left is people that read in digital or audiobooks. The middle, like the palest blue color, is people that only read print. And the far right sort of middle blue color is the percentage of people that are considered non-readers, so they don't read in any format. So, obviously at a university, we're looking at this 18 to 24-year-old demographic for the most part. And that's a large chunk of non-readers that we would like to see be more readers, no matter what format they're reading in. I saw something more recently that talked about, it said, I think it was like Pew Research, it was 1 in 3 Americans are reading an ebook. So that's for all ages. So that's, we're seeing a slight increase in that number of ebook readers. But like I said, we haven't been able to find this particular set of research replicated in a newer study than this 2017. But I still think this is a good snapshot of kind of the breakdown and the formats we see people reading for leisure. This is a little bit of a synopsis of more recent data from that same survey, but they didn't quite do the same level of analysis. But some of the highlights from that are that in 2022, which you have to remember was still considered the pandemic, so maybe the numbers are a little bit wonky or like haven't quite stabilized since we've come out of the pandemic. But in that one, they found that 53% of US adults read literature or books of some kind, which is down about 4% from that 2017 study. So again, like the trend is down, like how much it's down is a little bit hard to compare between different studies, but trending down. And if you look at over the last decade, that's a pretty sharp decline. So in 2012, it was 45%. And in this 2022, it's 37% of people reading novels or short stories. So it's specifically those genres for leisure reading. So that's why it's a little hard to compare, like it's like apples and oranges a bit. But like I said, still overall, we're seeing a general trend to less reading. I wanted to just briefly mention a few other factors that like are part of this as well. Audiobooks are seeing a lot more use and an increase in demand than in the past. I have to say myself, I'm a big audiobook listener. I know Monica is as well, and Katie. So we're seeing that format like increasing. We're seeing some streaming services get in on the action. For example, Spotify announced that they're going to be offering audiobooks. So we're seeing like different vendors and things like that sort of jump in to this sort of world. Book Talk is a big trend on TikTok that you can't really ignore. There's a lot of influencers there that are really shaping how a lot of leisure reading gets done, what authors are popular, what genres like romantasy are popular. So that's we don't have data on that, but I'm sure that's a big influence. Something that's interesting, if you look at the some of those national surveys that I mentioned in the other slides that I didn't pull out there, but I wanted to mention here is that like there's an increase in poetry and a lot of people reading poetry and listening to poetry via audiobooks or collections. So that's a relatively new trend that I think is interesting. I never even thought to listen to poetry that way, but apparently it's something that's gaining traction. And other languages as well is like, we don't have a lot of data on that in the research that we found. There's not a lot out there yet. So that's kind of a question mark for how we factor that into the work we're doing with leisure reading. So you might be wondering, like, don't public libraries, isn't this kind of their gig, leisure reading? Isn't this a lot of what they support? And that's a fair question. But as far as we go, our answers to that are, they do that, but what we see at Penn State with all of our campuses spread out through the state of Pennsylvania, a lot of those campus academic libraries function as public library ones in their communities. So this is maybe one of very few or only places that people can access leisure reading. Some people may not be aware of what their public library has, for any number of reasons. They may be trying to get all their content, whether it's leisure for school or whatever, at the library in this sort of one-stop shopping way. And so the library functioning for that, where they can get kind of both types of reading, I think is a really a real benefit to students. And kind of like to what I was saying earlier, that leisure reading just supports the entire student, whether or not they're in sort of school mode or just personal life mode. And then just a little bit, so this is the sort of standpoint we're going to be talking about our collections today, just so everybody kind of knows where we're coming from. At Penn State, we have print collections for leisure throughout the Commonwealth campus libraries. So at the different Penn State locations, They have leisure reading collections there. At University Park, where the three of us are based, we do have a dedicated leisure reading room for print collections. So they're all kind of in one general area for students to kind of browse the shelves and things like that, and visit. And then fairly recently, we're coming up on our second year of having Libby, which is the vendor's overdrive for that, but they offer ebooks and audiobooks, and we're using that primarily to deliver leisure reading titles in those two formats. And I have another poll here, which was, this is like an open-ended type question for you all to answer. What was the best last book you read? And if you have Menti open, you shouldn't have to do anything. It should just still be open for you. And you should see the slide advance to this question, which is, like I said, open-ended, so you can type in whatever you want, but what is the best last book you read? We're looking to hear suggestions, recommendations on what you liked. I see Gwen and Art are not in love. Again, the magic. The cartographers this summer will be different. Is that the one that's on the slide? That's yours, Monica? Nice. I picked a good one. Well, feel free to, and you can put more than one there in there if you would like. I wish I could remember, it's been a while. I know librarians don't have time to read them all. Definitely find some time this summer, but I understand we get busy. First Lie Wins, that sounds interesting. And the Kamogawa Food Detectives. I have not heard of any of these, which I find so interesting. Looking Glass Sound. I've not heard, I haven't heard of any of these except for the one that's on the slide. This summer will be different. Well, I'll definitely be adding those to my reading list, since they all come hopefully as recommendations from you all, since you were choosing the best last book you read. Let me go back to my slides. And I think that was actually my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Monica.
Monica, sorry.
That's okay. Yes, I happen to have just finished that book, Emily, and it was good, so I could recommend it. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of maybe thinking about how we use our leisure reading collections in an academic setting. So an important thing to do is identify stakeholders. And I put some general questions up on this slide here, such as, how does this collection fit with the mission or vision or strategic goals of your institution or your department as a library? Who is using this collection and who has access to this collection? And I think all of these questions could be helpful both before and after, or maybe during the creation of a developing goals for a leisure reading collection, or even collection development policies for that collection. And some examples of how we've thought about how the mission and vision and strategic goals of our institution, also university libraries at Penn State, how that fits with our leisure reading collection. I just pulled out some examples of that. So one is supporting student well-being. We're going to go into this in more depth later, and Emily already talked about the benefits that are around leisure reading, known benefits around leisure reading. And I will go into that a little bit later. And then another way that leisure reading could fit with an academic collection is supporting those DEIB initiatives. So this could include, having a diverse voices and stories available for your community. And Katie will kind of go into how we specifically looked at that. And another way that this can fit in is through accessibility and also just general support of curriculum. So we are talking about leisure reading outside of the curriculum, but I do think there is a space here, especially with some of our platforms that we have, where it fits into the curriculum. So for example, we had a class that they were reading The Handmaid's Tale and another title that I am forgetting at this moment, but we were able to get those as concurrent users in the ebook setting. So we were using our Libby by Overdrive setting. And then we just generally collected some data around how students felt about using this platform, how it went for the instructor. And that's another way, using a more accessible platform, having the audiobook available as well for students. So it just really opens a lot of possibilities for our students in a curricular setting as well. Oh, sorry, next slide. I was about to try to do it. Thanks. So another really important factor here, and this can come kind of after identifying those stakeholders, is incorporating user input. And this can look a variety of ways, and it's going to be based on your particular campus communities. So I'm just kind of highlighting some ways that we have incorporated user input with our collections. And one way we did that this past year with our University Library Student Advisory Group. So these are students from across the Commonwealth. We had representation from University Park students as well as many other campuses. And the way we usually set up those meetings, we explain about the service maybe we provide our collection. So we talked about the leisure reading collection. We talked about the DEI audit that we conducted and some information about that, as well as the collection analysis that we'll be getting to a little bit later. So we kind of give an overview of what these collections are, right? What comprises the leisure reading collection. And then we ask students for input on what titles they would like to see. And we really left it wide open, right? So you could give a specific title, but I think even of greater benefit to us is knowing what genres or types of books students like to read. And what emerged from this conversation was that students really wanted to see more self-improvement titles. And that is something we hadn't traditionally focused on in the past. So that was an area where we could, focus more efforts on our collection development. And so through that student advisory group, we were able to collect general titles of interest, topics of interest around that area. And that also fit with our student well-being initiative, which we call Live Well. So we were able to kind of partner with another initiative within the libraries to be able to purchase titles and then, create virtual displays that would highlight those for our students. So that's one way, incorporating that user input. Another way is book clubs on campus. So this can happen a number of ways. Sometimes book clubs reach out to us. Sometimes we see a book club's happening and we reach out to them to see how we can support. Generally, we do not purchase more than one copy of a title. There are special cases for that. But maybe we have an ebook, an audiobook, a physical copy or two, depending on what the group is looking for. But I think something that's even more important here is letting those book clubs know that we want to have these titles in our collection so that even when the book clubs conclude, assuming that they've enjoyed the title and they're going to be talking about it further outside of their book club, their word of mouth, they know that the library has a copy. So they could say, we read this really great book through, the Anti-Racist Literature Book Club at Penn State. And now I know that Penn State Libraries has it. This is how you can get a copy. So that's just a great way to promote that collection without buying 10 or 12 copies, which would, steeply cut into budgets, obviously. And that has been received really well. Really excited about building that over the next couple of years too. And another thing that we looked at is incorporating user input just through opportunities to receive recommendations. So title recommendations, the student advisory group is a very specific set of students. We want to make this more widely available. And previously we had just an email available where you could email and recommend titles. And this year we have included a form that can be filled out. I think it feels, or it is, more anonymous, right? When you're making it. And so you could indicate, on this form, we also included if you have a particular format that you're interested in, if you want the print copy, an audiobook, an ebook, large print, right? What have you, we could accommodate that as well. So it just gives us kind of more information, but I think also provides a more anonymous opportunity to give those book recommendations. Oh, sorry, next slide. Okay, so something we did also, which I mentioned earlier, is that we ran a collection analysis on our leisure reading collection, or collections rather. So this came about because we were looking at budgets, of course, as I think everyone everywhere is. And we really wanted to inform purchasing, particularly on our Baker and Taylor leased collections. So different campuses have different contracts for the Baker and Taylor lease collection. So we kind of wanted to see what was usage, who was using the collection, give us some general data that we hadn't collected before. And so this analysis was the collection analysis. So what titles we had, what was available, as well as the circulation of those items. And I was really excited by the data. I think we all were on the committee that looked at this, or the group that looked at it, because I think this is a good way to, well, yeah, of course you want data to know what's happening, but I think there was an assumption that maybe our leisure reading collection was not being used by students as much as it was by staff and faculty. And so, when budget comes up, that's something, are we serving our students or not, right? And so when we looked at all of the collections, there were some challenges that arose in that the cataloging of these items, right? So what at UP we might call the leisure reading collection, maybe at Beaver's campus, they call it popular reading, right? So I think that even if you don't have multiple campuses, you might think, well, if I'm really doing a leisure reading analysis of my collection, what do I want to include? Do I want to include the graphic novels? Do I want to include young adult titles? Do I want to, that could be something that you have to think about. And we had some challenges there pooling all of that data because we don't have maybe a standardized way of cataloging those items. And again, what to include, right? There are some special collections that are set aside. Would we want to include that in leisure reading as well? So those were just some challenges we had with the leisure analysis, but I think we got some pretty good data. And some highlights of it were, I said, we were really excited to see that consistently 20 to 30% of materials circulated were by undergraduate students. So that's not even total students, right? Because we also have graduate level students as well. And at University Park in 2023 in particular, we had 38% of our collection that was circulated by undergraduate students. So that was really exciting. I think that strengthens your argument to have leisure reading in your collection. But another thing that came up was that 69% of the titles were unique. So we thought there would be a lot more overlap, everybody having the fourth wing, for example. And there were more unique titles than we expected, meaning that each of these collections in each of these unique campus communities were really being reflected in that leisure reading, which was great to see. And I think now, so this was general collection analysis, so of the collection and of the circulation. And now Katie's going to talk more about how we did a DEI audit on the leisure reading collection.
Thanks, Monica. So when in early 2023, I had met with Emily about working as an intern for my capstone project here at Library Learning Services. And I was really interested in working with the leisure reading collection. So Emily had shared an ACRL article with me about a group of students at the University of the Pacific who had done an audit on one of their collections, and just using that as a jumping off point, seeing if we could replicate something for the University Park leisure reading collection. So coming from a background in mostly school libraries, I look at representation. I kind of lean into Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop idea of titles being either mirrors, windows, or sliding glass doors for readers to walk into or to look out or to see their own identity reflecting. So offering diverse books actually offers our patrons at University Park campus and a better understanding of themselves, of the struggles of others. It allows for empathy to grow when you, it also will help the students in the community grow in a more culturally collaborative way. So thinking of those in those terms as I approached the leisure reading DEI audit, I did some planning and I did some research. As I was developing the audit process, I worked quite closely with Emily and with others in Library Learning Service to think about how to put this all together. So between the research, I also was looking at data from Penn State's Data Digest, as well as the DEIB database, to really get an understanding of the community that the leisure reading collection serves, and to make sure that it was honoring that community. In addition, I also spent hours in the Petit leisure reading room, just watching patrons engage with the collection and seeing, what they walked up to, what areas they gravitated toward. I spent some time all over Petit just watching. And so using this research data and observations, I was able to find a good jumping off point to start this audit. Emily, could I have the next slide? The next slide is a Menti here. I was just wondering what types of books you like to read. Do you like to read books that are windows, giving you a view into someone else's life? Do you like to read mirror books, those that are really kind of reinforce identity in the world, or sliding glass doors, which really is walking into a story that you become such a part of a character. You feel like you can walk right into their world and you feel the empathy for them. So if you could go to your Menti app again and tell us your choices: windows, mirrors, sliding glass doors. What are the kind of books you prefer to read? Okay. Oh, so it looks like we have a pretty good range. Oh, okay, so up and down. I love the interactivity of the Mentimeter. But this is great. It shows that, we all like different books and we all come from different backgrounds. And so we all need different mirrors, different windows, different sliding glass doors that and representation in collections such as these. Thank you so much, Emily. Could you go to the next slide, please? So the leisure reading collection at Penn State, I would have loved to have gotten my hands on all 9,000 titles, print and digital, but I had a 10-week window of time. And knowing that I wanted to, do some other things in those 10 weeks, I decided to narrow the scope using the Library of Congress call numbers, thinking about things such as essays, art, language, literature. I narrowed the group of leisure reading materials into, I looked at HM through HX, and then all things in music, all categories in art, and all categories in language, so M, N, and P. So I took those, and that gave me 3,200 titles. I moved those into an Excel file, and I use the Excel randomize function, which I love, to give each title its very own randomized number. From then, I was able to sort. I sorted smallest to largest number. You could do it in reverse. And I selected a third of those titles for deeper review because I knew that I would not be able to get to even the 3,200 in that 10 weeks of time. Next slide, please. This just gives you an idea of what the layout for the audit looked like. I had always had two screens open. I flowed about 1,000 titles into an Excel, or this is a Google Sheet, so Emily and I and others in leisure and library learning services could share the audit that I was doing. I put those in the file, and then across the top, I came up with with the help of others, about 70 categories, including general information, author information, main character information, genre information, and then some other special inclusion, categories as well. I then would open 5 tabs on my computer screen. I would always start with the Penn State Library catalog as my anchor, and then work my way through Goodreads, Amazon, Publishers Weekly, and morediverse.com. In doing this, I would copy and paste the title into each of of these search engines and then start to gather some of the data about these 70 or so categories. I would use Goodreads and Amazon most specifically for author information. Usually they have a short bio or a link to an author's personal page. I did want to note that it's hard to find, there's only so much discoverable material, and sometimes authors in the research I had done do not care to be labeled under specific race, ethnic, gender areas. So there were some unknowns in this process. But this is kind of how I proceeded across all the titles on each day. Could I have the next slide, Emily? So in total, I analyzed 1,033 of the randomly selected titles for the representation across these 70 categories. The main things we were looking for were the gender and author, the gender of the author and the main character of books, the race and ethnicity of the author and main character, and again, as I said, these special categories for inclusion, including mental health, disabilities, homelessness, things of that nature. After going through this with all the over 1,000 titles, it was time consuming, but it was really interesting to see how it all came together. I was then able to assess the findings of the audit against representation at the university with the university committee or community that the leisure reading supports, that this collection supports. So I was pleasantly surprised a lot of times as I did the research, so many collections were really underrepresented. And I wasn't sure what I might find in the leisure reading collection, but I was happy with the results, as I think others were. Do you mind moving to the next slide? This is just a quick snapshot of some of the representation in the portion of the collection that I audited. As you'll note at the bottom, not all author and character and identity or race and ethnicity is known. This represents the author and character data that was discoverable. So as you see in the leisure reading collection currently, there are a lot of female identifying voices in the collection, not only authors, but also main characters. There are men, there's a small number of non-binary, transgender man and transgender woman. There could be more, but as I said, some of these things are not discoverable, and I wanted to err on the side of caution of not reading into any data and adding things that would skew the results. Okay, the next slide. The next slide just takes a look at the race and ethnicity in the collection. As you'll see, white authors are a big portion. You'll notice that white main characters are not as large a portion. It's hard to know maybe an ethnicity of a main character if it's not referenced in the book. And so I only referenced main character race or ethnicity if it was a real person in nonfiction or a real person in historical fiction. So that's the breakdown that we're looking here. And can I have the next slide, Emily? Finally, these are just some of the other voices in the collection that I was looking at: neurodivergence, people with disabilities, immigrants, refugees, body size, first generation, a number of different inclusive areas that I wanted to kind of encapsulate in this snapshot. So those are the number of books per the 1,000. All right, last slide, I think, of mine. So the audit results, as I said, the representation in the sample was very proportional with the gender, race, and ethnic figures that were reported in by the university and the Data Digest and the DEIB database. Some lessons that I learned that can inform future iterations of an audit such as this: I would have an unknown category. There are a lot of unknowns, and it's better maybe to acknowledge that there are unknowns as you move forward in collecting data of this sort. But I also felt very confident. I know that the university libraries is very committed to DEI, and making sure that collections such as this remain vibrant and viable for for perpetuity for all the students and all the community members, so they can see themselves, everyone can see themselves in the leisure reading collection here at University Park. All right, I think that was, yeah.
Thanks, Katie. So just to wrap up with a couple things here, I wanted to re-emphasize leisure reading and student well-being. So the title of our presentation, right, is for advocating for leisure reading in your collection. And one of the ways that we really highlight that is student well-being. And I just put up on this slide again what Emily talked about at the beginning of our presentation. And this is information of why leisure reading, the benefits of leisure reading, right, supported by scientific data. But really what it's about is we want to be serving our students holistically, right? And leisure, or their well-being, leisure reading can be part of that. And it also is really about breaking down the barriers. So I don't think we can eliminate all barriers, but a reason why, well, yes, public libraries offer this, but we also know that our students are overwhelmed in so many ways, and having this as part of our collection could be really important, or could be, a turning point for them to actually be able to tap into leisure reading as a way to maybe de-stress a little bit. So some of the ways we are highlighting that is through our programming. I always use the terms passive and active, and I'm not sure if those are correct usages, but I think of some passive ways, or less, not so much an event situation, but other ways that we can promote these collections. And those are through this displays, right? These displays can be virtual or physical in this space. Taking polls. So we have a whiteboard up in the space at University Park, and sometimes we just ask questions like, what is your favorite genre to read? And students can write up or do tally marks, add extra categories genres that we might not have thought about. We also are looking into incorporating a wellness corner into our leisure reading space. So that would be a space where we can pull out specific books that are related to wellness, have other services and collections highlighted in that space. And I also think leisure reading can be a great space to highlight other collections that you have, totally, right? So if you are highlighting some young adult titles, we could say also on the 5th floor of Paterno at University Park, you could find more titles like this, right? So even if it's in a different space. Some more active programming that could be available is, book club meetups. We read recently about silent reading parties. So just having people come together and read whatever they're reading on their own time, but kind of carving out that space so that we can read together. In solidarity there. Maybe some themed events. So this could go with other programming that you're doing. For example, the Informed Consumer committee that we have for PA Forward, maybe linking some of our leisure reading collection with some of those events. Next slide, please. And so promotion of the collection. We talked a lot about this, but I think partnering with other events and book clubs, like I just said, having those displays, the physical and the virtual, are a great way to promote the collection and also promote other collections within. So if you have Overdrive or Libby, they have a really great feature where it's called Shelf Talkers, and you can add notes to the titles. And we are looking to do that in combination with a reading challenge that Beaver Campus is doing. And so they've already gathered this information about titles that the community enjoyed reading and why, and then we can link those with those actual titles where you can see them in a virtual space. This also allows for all of our students to have access to the leisure reading collection, including World Campus, but at any location. And another good way of doing this is through press releases. We often have some of those virtual displays for Libby and Overdrive, or in our physical spaces. For example, we had a press release that just within the Penn State community about our titles for Women's History Month, right? So there are just ways that you can highlight and let people know that this collection is available to them. And so on the next page, final slide here, I just really wanted to highlight this amazing program that Beaver did. So they called it Beyond the Bookends, and it was a reading challenge for their campus community specifically. And you can see how they set it up here with how, you know, information on finding books, reading recommendations, just all that kind of information. They way surpassed what they thought would be the input or the participation in this programming, and they're looking to maybe expand it to other campuses and maybe have kind of a read off challenge. So there's just a lot of fun ways to get people excited and just let people know what kind of books we do have available to them in this space. Okay, and I think we did leave about 12 minutes for any questions you may have or further discussion.
Does anybody have any questions? I went muted. I see Emily has her hand up.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I appreciate doing what I can with leisure reading at my campus. So I'm just curious if at University Park or if you've heard from any of our other colleagues. So for those of you that don't know, I work at the Harrisburg campus for Penn State, of any successful collaborations with student groups or other offices. So at my campus, we do have book club boxes that we were able to get through a grant with Barnes and Noble. And trying to get student buy-in for those has been challenging, but our faculty, well, our staff for the most part are really interested in doing that and some of their departments. So I just don't know if you've had any success in working with student groups directly related to leisure reading.
Yes, we have some book club kits as well. And Emily, you might know the background of where those are from. We have also found that challenging, Emily, to get people on board because there's specific titles, right, already that we have. However, I just reached out to the student club at University Park. That's just, I think it's just called Book Club, right? But it's a student group, and they were very interested. So I will see where that goes this fall. But other places we've tried to promote these materials are LEAP, so like the summer program, right? Where there's more specific groups, but I think the answer is we will let you know and let us know, because I think it's really great that we have these kits, but yeah, finding the right group or buy-in can be difficult.
And we have a question in chat from Sylvia. For your Overdrive, do you purchase titles directly, or are you using the patron-driven acquisitions model?
I'm looking at Monica. Monica's going to be. We purchase titles directly, but we do have. There is an option if you're familiar with Libby and Overdrive. There's an option to like request that your library buys that title, and so we pay a lot of attention to those. They're called Notify Me tags. So we have like a report set to run every month that if there's more than 2 Notify Me tags on a title, gets dumped into like a report, and we prioritize purchasing those the next time we purchase something. So we are using the direct model to buy titles, but we definitely take the input of our patrons on what we buy. Is that accurate, Monica?
Yeah, I think that's it's very accurate, and that has been helpful. We also have I guess a group that does collection development for our e-collection or our virtual collections, so our audiobooks and ebooks. And I would like to have representation from each campus. I don't think we quite have that yet, but that is helpful in that then there's a point person at each location where, you know, if you had a student come up and ask about a particular book and they indicated that they would like audio or ebook, then that is put into a spreadsheet and we have meetings and talk about it that way. So, you know, I think generally they know, or our organization knows, that Library Learning Services is in charge of the collection development for Libby and Overdrive, so we're always available to reach out, but that's another way that we can get that patron or student input into our purchases.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I was just gonna ask the audience if anybody here has like a leisure reading collection at your location, if you have anything you'd like to add in terms of just things you've noticed or fun things about it or programming, anything like that. I would just invite anybody that's attending that has anything they want to share with us to please go ahead and do it. Paul doesn't have books anymore.
Sylvia, I see you muted, unmuted yourself, unmuted, muted again. Did you want to add something?
Has my microphone been muted the whole time?
I hear you
Sorry.
now. I don't know if you were talking earlier, but
I
we hear you
was.
now.
I was, sorry.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation. We just added a small recreational reading collection at our library, and one of the things we're struggling with is format, because pricing wise, I think offering both electronic format and print format is a little outside our means right now. So it's really useful to see that there are folks offering both. And I'm just wondering, do you notice that you get more engagement with one or the other?
That's a good question. Overdrive is still really new to us. Like Emily said, our contract started in November, which feels like a weird time how budgets work. But so in November, we'll be coming up on our second year. So we don't have a ton of data yet, I would say, to see, like, to compare the print versus virtual collections. Overall, I think it's been really well received. It's hard to take your own bias out, right? Emily and Katie and I love audiobooks. So I love that option that Overdrive brings for audiobooks. But I think we might need more time before we can do a true comparison of, what patrons prefer.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, like, that's going to be the next step for us, is to get the data from Libby or Overdrive and do some analysis on that, because we had, like Monica's saying, we're just coming up on 2 years. There wasn't a lot there. You can see some basic stats, like how many checkouts and those kinds of things. But to do a more detailed analysis, we'll have to, set ourselves up to do that pretty soon. We haven't so far because it's relatively new. So I think we'll know more about engagement after that. But I think even though we have this bias for our audiobooks, I do think it's a unique thing that we're able to offer, because I think a lot of today's students probably aren't like checking out audiobooks on CDs, and their public library may or may not have Libby. I mean, that kind of depends on the library and whether or not they've chosen to go with something like that. And there's other vendors too, as well as Overdrive, but I think that's kind of a unique area where we can offer leisure reading. And like I said, the trends are showing that there is a lot more interest in audiobooks. Like, that format is on the rise. So I'm interested to see where that goes in the next couple of years.
And something nice about Overdrive / Libby, it has 2 names, is that you can stack your cards. So you might know this already, but if you're unfamiliar with the system, so, if you are, say, part of the Philadelphia Free Library, Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, your local library in your community, public library in your community, then our students can also add Penn State, and it just pulls from all of your cards. So if we have a shorter wait list, you'd want to, put our book on hold first. And it's just kind of nice because I think it expands out the collection in a way. And that's something that is kind of an extra step, I guess, to educate our patrons on, right? That they have this access, or they can add multiple cards, but it is a good way that kind of can build almost on your own collection, is that you get to tap in this one system, you can tap into multiple collections.
And I think the most recent update of Overdrive and Libby, actually, if you do stack them, it will search your holds list throughout all of them, and whatever, just Monica, like you said, whatever has the shortest waiting date will automatically come into your queue. So yeah.
Thank you very much. We have about a minute or so left, so I have to get through this closing statement real quick. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank Monica, Emily, and Katie for presenting. I hope everyone will take a few moments to complete the survey, which I'm about to drop into the chat as soon as I remember how to do this. It's there. It'll also be sent out via email once the recording is all complete and uploaded. Speaking of it, as a reminder, the recording of this presentation will be available to PALA members as soon as possible through the PALA website. And as I said, I'll also be sending everybody who registered a copy of the link and links to both the recordings and the survey as soon as I can. If you are not a PALA member and you are interested in becoming one, please feel free to email us and I'll have the appropriate person contact you. I also invite you to contact me with your suggestions for future discussions, and I most definitely invite you to contact me if you'd love to present. We always have more sessions than we have presenters, it seems, so if you have a great idea on something to present, let us know. We'll make sure we give you the time and space to do so. So most importantly of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming and have a great day.